Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of A Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey. And out of a scale of 10, the pollen is an 8.5. So maybe you can hear it. I'm feeling it. It's a one day into fall and suddenly there's just allergies everywhere. So yeah, but what I want to say is that as someone who creates content, especially anytime I put out faith-based content, I get a lot of, hey, I'm that guy on the internet who hates you. I know you never met me. A lot of guys on the internet who hate me for no reason. But today I am here with hashtag that lady on the internet who loves you. His Danielle Bernock is known as that lady on the internet who loves you. And I personally love that. I think, you know, one of the things I put forward is that a lot of us in this field, we care a lot about people. That's why we're in this. We're in this to serve others, to help others, to prevent them from going through what we've gone through. If they've gone through what we've gone through, to help their healing process to be smoother than what we went through, and to just educate and empower new generations and people of all ages and diversities to, just be able to live the best life they can. At least that's how I feel. Humanity is my quote, who I'm serving, right? So I'm here with hashtag that lady on the internet who loves you, Ms. Danielle Bernock. Great to have you here. And could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, well, thanks for having me on here and highlighting my hashtag. Yes, I took ownership of that hashtag during the pandemic is when it unfolded because of all the fear that was active in the world, and love is what drives that out. So I'm like, I'm pushing love, and love is the center of all that I do, anyways. So why not capitalize on that? And it's every person's greatest need is love. So it's all about the love. It's love that has healed my heart. So on my website, I say I'm connecting you to the love that heals because there's toxic kind of love out there as well that
Oh yeah. Yeah.
happens when people go through trauma, and there's unhealthy self-love and there's healthy self-love. These are things I deal with, but it was unconditional love that delivered me and healed me. And God gave me the gift of my husband, and he was one of the key factors in my healing process. Chapter 3 in my book, Emerging with Wings, is dedicated to that man. His name is Michael. Before that, I was not familiar with unconditional love. I was very familiar with conditional love and didn't know anything else
Mm.
was available. I'm a childhood trauma survivor, a great big pile of it, very diverse, many different kinds, complex trauma. I didn't know that. I just knew I was messed up when I was an adult. And it was through my counseling and just striving to heal and not feel so miserable that I learned about trauma and shared my story with the world and wanted to help people heal quicker, if possible, than I had. But the world is full of so many tools now that were not available 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I've been married for 45 years. 45 years ago, things were not available. Science and faith didn't even talk to each other back then. I've heard you, Mr. Whiskey, say how you like those two together. So do I. That's what I do, is to blend those because I believe everyone needs faith. Everybody believes something. We don't all believe the same things, but everybody believes something. So faith is a part of your life, even if you don't want to admit it. And science is a part of your life, even if you don't like it. And those are two things that we need. We need the love to heal our heart. We need the process in our brains and our minds to reprogram and to process what we've been through. So that's a little bit about me. I came to do what I do now because of that first book, releasing it and it resonating with people. My epiphany writing that book became a viral quote out in the world, which astounded me. I'm like, oh wow, maybe I'm onto something here.
For sure. So let's start with, you talked about, you know, having a traumatic childhood and that manifesting in your adulthood. Can you tell us kind of about what that traumatic childhood looked like?
There was multiple things. I had trauma at church, trauma at school, trauma in the neighborhood, and trauma at home. Public shaming, public rejecting, multiple deaths, bullying. Only kind I didn't have was uh, sexual abuse, which is one of the reasons I had such a hard time validating that I actually had trauma because I didn't know what trauma was, which
Mm,
most people in the world don't know what trauma is. They think it's what happened to you, and it's not what happened to you because two people can go through the exact same thing and come through completely differently.
right.
So, trauma is the wound that's left behind after you've been through something. I like to illustrate it for people who really misunderstand this to draw the picture. Two little girls are skipping down the street together and they both fall down. One of them gets up, she's fine. The other one's sitting on the ground crying. And her friend is going, "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" And well, the one who fell down is crying. She scraped her knee. But the one who got up and it's fine, she did not. Both of them were skipping, both of them fell, one of them
Mm,
got a wound. And that wound is not that little girl's fault either. And trauma is not the fault of someone who has experienced it. That's a very, crude
yeah.
illustration, but it's something we can really see. We can get the visual of that it wasn't what happened to her. It's the wound that was left behind because of she went through that. And so I had also something called childhood emotional neglect, which I'm so thankful for my counselor who identified it, even though she didn't know what it was. Because I contacted her years later after I learned that term to ask her, "Have you ever heard of this term?" And she had not. Excuse me. So I share that for two reasons is you don't need to know what it's called to heal from it.
Yeah, for sure.
Childhood emotional neglect is a huge problem in our world, primarily because people don't know it exists and because it's something that's missing. If you lose a thing and you go looking for it, you know what you're looking for. You're looking for a thing. But if you lost something and you don't know what you lost and you don't even know that you lost it, then you don't go looking and you don't find it. See, childhood emotional neglect is you didn't get something that you needed. And so something it's invisible. Every child has a certain amount of emotional nurture that they need, and every child is different, and no parent is perfect. So it's not about being a perfect parent. You can do everything with all your heart and do your best, and you can still emotionally neglect your kids if you don't have the tools to give them what they need, which was what happened in my case. Both my parents, they did not hurt me on purpose. They were missing the tools, and so they couldn't give them to me. So I grew up without certain emotional tools. I didn't know what my emotions were. I stuffed them all down. I had all the signs of childhood emotional neglect. There's a lady, Dr. Janice Webb, who has a book, Running on Empty. I tell everybody about it. It's how I discovered that's what I had, and I discovered that I had had it in 3 different ways. She unpacks it with 12 different illustrations. It's a fantastic book. If you want more information, get that book because it's a whole book. I'm not going to talk about it the whole time today.
For sure. I'm probably gonna go get that and read that myself, actually. That sounds like something, I'd like to, explore further because I think it's something that we've touched upon with a lot of people on this show. I really appreciate you not completely villainizing all parents, saying that sometimes they just don't have the tools, and I think it can be hard to understand what your kid needs, especially if they're not expressing it, but part of that is creating an environment where your kid can express to you and can come to you, and some parents, unfortunately, create an environment where their kids don't trust them or don't wanna talk to them, or because their parents are so reactionary or judgmental, they close off, so I think there is a balance to be had. Now you talked about your book, and I know you have multiple books, and you do a lot nowadays. And like we said, it's to help people heal faster. You mentioned, your healing process. How long did that take you ultimately to kind of come to realize everything, to come to, that full fruition of healing? Like, how long did that take you?
It happened in stages, so I'm not quite sure.
Mhm.
We've been married for 45 years. I published my book 11 years ago. And while I was writing my book, and I was in counseling while I was writing my book, my counselor re- revealed to me, exposed things in my life I didn't know at that time. At that time, I thought I was healed, but I was not because she unpacked things that I was unaware of. So It's difficult to say how long, and one of the things I wrestled with so much with my counselor is I would beat myself up because I was not healing fast enough for myself.
Mhm.
Maybe it needs to take this long, and some
Right.
things do take longer. I mean, if you go on
100%.
for surgery, it takes longer to heal than if you get a paper cut. You know, it's just whatever kind of wound you have and how it
Right.
manifests. It does. It's some things do take longer. It's just a matter of that. But part of the healing process is to learn that grace for yourself that it's okay. One thing I do know how long it took me was it took me 35 years to believe the love of God. And I write about that. I have a book I give away at free at my website called Love's Manifesto because I struggled to believe the love of God. And as I said, I had trauma at church. I had 3 different kinds of trauma that happened at church. And it's the
Mhm.
bullseye trauma in my life. There's a whole chapter on it in my book as well. And it it wounded me so deeply, and I believed the lie that was planted in my heart that day that God himself had thrown me away. And so if
Right.
God himself had thrown me away, and then I come back later after I'm done trying to prove he doesn't exist and I'm done being mad at him, and finally, he pursues me and convinces me to come back, so I do, even though I'm terrified of him because of what I know and believe about him that were lies. Then I'm hearing, "Oh, Jesus loves you," which I'd heard that as a kid, but, as a kid, you don't internalize it unless you really experience that. I experienced
Right.
the opposite. And I struggled to believe that it was real, that it was unconditional, because I knew conditional love, as I had said a little bit earlier. And that fit with the trauma that was in the church as well, and the authoritarianism and imposed stoicism that I had endured growing up as well. And you have to perform, and you're never good enough. And if you know, I'll love you with, and if you sin, you're bad. And then the bad theology, and you need to repent and you need to ask forgiveness every 3 seconds, or you're going to hell. And I was so terrified. I would journal about how I was afraid of falling into outer darkness, and I lived in that fear. It was a very pervasive fear. And so it took me 35 years to believe that God loved me in my ugliest moments, no matter what I'm doing, and he will never throw me away. And I remembered the moment and I remembered the day and I wrote it down in the note. That's how I know exactly how long from the time I came back to him to that day. It was 35 years. And that was through a lot of work. I was reaching for it and trying to reprogram myself and trying to learn about, you know, the good things of God. But I had bad theology in there that prolonged that longer than it needed to take.
What was kind of the idea behind, "I'm going to write a book now"? Was it, "Hey, I think writing a book will heal me," or was it, "I think my story should get out there"? What kind of inspired writing that first book?
I wanted to help people. I wanted to help people. I thought about it earlier, but I had no confidence in being able to do that. I haven't even asked someone if they would write it if I gave them information, but then it just kind of fell off the plate and, life happened. But then after I'd gone through a very transitional uh, and transformational part of my life, my husband and I had moved. We live in Michigan and we had moved to Arizona, and we lived there for 5 years. And then we came back to Michigan. In those 5 years, I became a different person through healing and taking ownership of who I was. I grew and healed profoundly during those 5 years. So when I came back, I felt like I couldn't keep that to myself. I had tasted a kind of freedom and something that I wanted to share, and I didn't know how to do that. And through my story of how I got there, and it happened one morning. I was doing my morning time with God. I was reading a devotional, and the title of the devotional was Dare to Decide. And I just felt compelled inside to today's the day. I'm going to decide today I'm going to write a book. Okay, great. What does that mean? And how do I do that? So I went to Google and started researching and looking, how do you do that? And that was the beginning of the process.
Okay. And how long did it take you to write that first book?
A little over a year and a half from writing to publishing. I have an article on my website you should write a book, even if you're not the best writer. And I have exactly how many days and months and everything it took me on that article. I don't remember the exactness right now.
And that first book was the Emerging with Wings?
Yes.
Okay. And then you have multiple books on your website, as you mentioned. Was it kind of just like as I call it when I talk about writing, like the bug bit you where you wrote one and now you're like, I think I'm gonna write another one. And then you're like, why not another one? Was it kind of that, or was there kind of a big pause and then you were kind of hesitant about it?
From being on another podcast, I discovered, as we were talking about it during the podcast, I discovered that every one of my books has a mission. And so my first one had a mission to share my story and to share how love will heal you, because the subtitle is A True Story of Lies, Pain, and a Love That Heals. And then my next book that I wrote was called A Bird Named Payne, and that was a short allegory of dealing with the complex emotions when you have a loved one with Alzheimer's. I
Mhm.
couldn't find any help dealing with my emotions and my mental health when my mother-in-law was going through Alzheimer's. You hear about all these god awful diseases out there, but you really don't know how awful they are till you're walking through it yourself personally.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find the help I needed back then. So I was just praying, and God gave me that as a gift. I came home one day from visiting my mother-in-law, and I had just been reeling to and fro in my emotions. I was just beside myself with, I should be happy about this, and I'm upset about this. And my husband was working out of town at the time. And it's like I was just all over the place emotionally because of what was going on. And she's not there, but she's there because Alzheimer's is a cruel thing. It's the long goodbye that you lose the person while they're still in front of you. And it's like, how do you deal with that? And I came home one day from visiting her, and God just downloaded that story to me. First of all, I was struggling with, I don't know what to call all these emotions because there were so many of them. And what God gifted me with, almost like in math, and you do math, you reduce something to the lowest common denominator if you're working with fractions. And that's what he did with all those emotions. He took all of them and he boiled them down into one word, and it was the word pain. All of those emotions I was dealing with were calling me pain. But the
Yeah.
allegory is a bird named Pain, and it was how those emotions, they would go and they would fly around, and then they would land on me and they would land on someone else. And so it's like an allegory about that, but it's Payn because, it's talking about
Correct.
bird. But that was a mission to help myself and then to put it out there to help someone else. And then Love's Manifesto came about as I reached for a writing mentor after I published my first book and discovered I needed to get it out there because it was helping people more than I thought. I'm like, I need to have a blog and I don't know how to do that. I found a writing mentor, and he said I needed to have a manifesto of what am I doing? What is what I'm doing all about? And so I sat down with the mission of that, of how to explain what do I do. And the chapters in that, it's a short audio book. It's less than 10 minutes long. It's free at my website, but it's what is love, why we don't believe it, and what it takes to convince us. And then I was, just doing my thing, you know, writing, and do freelance writing, things like that. And then I wanted to write another book about the emotions because I'd learned so much about emotions. And I started, and it wasn't coming together. It wasn't gelling. I didn't like it. It was very fragmented. So I shelved it and I wasn't going to do it. And then one day when I left church, I got just given the title of Because You Matter. I wrote it on a little sticky note. I still have this sticky note to this day.
Uh,
Because You Matter, how to take ownership of your life so you can really live. And it's a self-help book of how to reclaim your courage, reclaim your sense of choice, reclaim your purpose, reclaim all the different areas of your life, and explaining the difference between responsibility and ownership and why ownership, that word, is so important. But then I interviewed 10 people and shared their stories, one in between every one of the chapters, because maybe someone can't relate to my story, but they can relate to Naomi's story, or they can relate to John's story, or they can relate to Sylvia's story. because they were through completely different things and how they took ownership of their life. So that became a different kind of mission that the title was given to me, and it's about focusing on your value. People need to know how much they matter. And that was came out right before the pandemic. And then my newest one is Taco Bout Your Value. I Fun to feed your self-esteem. I created that alongside with my grandson, who was 12 at the time, because he's an artist. And he was showing me his artwork. He had drawn all these different tacos. They were singing and dancing and being mechanics and teachers and nurses and doctors and from all different countries. And it was just so cool. And they're all happy. But then on one page was one burrito, and that burrito was upset. And I'm like, Gideon, what's wrong with the burrito? He said, he's upset because he's down to taco. And I was cut to my heart because the second leading cause of death in children aged 10 to 14 is suicide.
Yeah.
And I said to Gideon, we have to do something with this. You have hit something here. So I was praying about how to do that. I'd never written a children's book. He had never written anything. Does he want to do this? So praying about what are we going to do with this? And it ended up becoming an activity book. So he created the characters in the book. I created the puzzles that are in the book. We wrote the stories together. And so there's over 100 different activities, and it's designed for kids to do with someone and to talk about what is in the book to bring up their inherent value. I bring up that word inherent. It's not a word we hear all the time, especially kids probably don't hear that. But to hear that word and to know that they have value right there as is, without earning it, doesn't matter what they look like, doesn't matter what their favorite topic at school is, because if a child can be strong on the inside, they are less subject to bullying. And I learned that through my friend Tom. His story is in my book, Because You Matter. He was bullied, and a kid lit his pants on fire. I mean, that's pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, kids are cruel.
It did not affect him negatively because he knew who he was, and he was loved, and he knew that. And so he had that strength on the inside. So my mission with that book was to help kids be so strong on the inside that when bullying happens, because we can't stop it, we are trying to, but we can't control other people. But
Yeah,
if we can make ourselves stronger, it can make us less subject to that.
for sure. I think that's important, and kids are so cruel, and bullying has just gotten worse and worse with the internet, of course, and the ability to be anonymous, to be, faceless, nameless, to be everywhere at once. It's just terrible. I love what you've done with your grandson. One of my goals has always been as well a suicide prevention book for children because I've, guested on shows speaking as a guest expert on suicide in children. And it's very sad to know that children as young as 10 years old are taking their life. And so I've wanted, the hardest thing, like you said, how do we get big, dark lessons like that into a children's book? It's hard enough already getting regular day-to-day lessons, but to address suicide in a way that is, it's on one hand, I think it's getting easier because I feel like a lot of like the age of innocence and the age of like adulthood has shifted. I feel like a lot of children are exposed to so much adult stuff that they're growing
Yeah,
up a lot faster.
yeah,
In some ways, that's good, and in a lot of ways, it's bad. The average age of exposure to pornographic and sexual content is 8 to 9 years old. I mean, that's really sad. I mean, that
yeah.
sickens me. And then on the other hand, our kids are, I think, smarter at a younger age than when we were at that age. But again, with knowledge comes all that bad knowledge and the opportunity for evil. So it's really such a hard balance and trying to figure out how to address that with children can be so difficult. So I appreciate what you've done with your grandson. And I think that's so cute that you had that family bonding experience too between you and him. And I'm sure it's really boosted his self-esteem. Be like, I helped make that book. Like that's such an
He's
amazing
his
thing for a
daughter,
kid. Yeah,
now he's 14, so
yeah, that's awesome. Now you've talked about all your work and help through writing and being an author, but I know you're also a coach. At what point did you say, "Hey, forget just the writing, that reaches one medium of people. I want to go reach more people and be a coach?
It unfolded in my journey 'cause I started with writing and then the first book, and then I went into a blog, and then I went into freelance writing. And after that, it was like, I need help in an area of business. So I got a business coach, and it was through that that I learned more about coaching and speaking. And so it was through little by little growing. So one thing kept adding to another. How many ways can I reach? My company is called 4F Media because I want to use every form of media to get the message out there that people matter and that they are loved. Those are my primary messages. You matter and you are loved. You matter and you are loved. So if I can get that on any medium out there, I have a YouTube channel. I had a podcast for 3 years. I did book signings in grocery stores for 3 years because there's a organization that does that. It's available in like 9 different states. If anyone's interested, they can contact me. But finding different things, looking for what's available now. And as the world changes, you said kids are smarter now. You're talking about the suicide prevention. I remembered being on one of the podcasts this past year, talking with a gentleman who works in this space. And he brought something really interesting to the forefront. I'd never heard it that way because they say suicide prevention. And he said, I really hate that term. And then he unpacked that because it's focusing on the suicide instead of the prevention part kind of thing. He said, I think it should be life preservation. You don't throw someone a life preserver when they're drowning and call it an anti-drowning device.
Hmm.
You
You know
don't
what you're
for
saying? Yeah.
anti-drowning, and he unpacked other illustrations like that. I went, "Wow, that is really insightful." I had never seen it like that. And when someone is calling for help, you call the crisis line. He said, "Hello, crisis line. What's your crisis?" It's like they already know they have a crisis. And using that term, it just kind of is pushing them more. So he was focusing on flipping the script a little bit to life preservation and the support line instead to speak to the help aspect of it instead of the negative aspect. I thought that was real insightful.
Yeah. Same with what if we changed, Alcoholics Anonymous to, sober pursuers or something like that, like, because some of the people I've had on my show, they said the problem is a lot of addicts get so focused on what they can't do and on the addiction and on the alcohol itself rather than everything in life around them. And I shared this as well. A preacher had said, what did Satan do to get Adam and Eve to fall? It was to get them focused away from abundance, everything that they did have, and get them focused on what they didn't have.
Right.
So that can be such a terrible trap, to focus so much on the bad or what you don't have rather than all that you do have. So, you
That's so
did
true. It's like when you tell a kid they can't do something, what do they want to do? That thing you told them to not.
exactly.
It just like pokes us. Same thing with PTSD. There's a podcast out there I listened to a few years ago, and they were talking about they were trying to change it from PTSD to PTSI, from post traumatic stress disorder to post traumatic stress injury.
Mm.
It's injury. It's not a disorder. It changes.
Yeah, I
It's
like
got
that too.
stigma to it. And if we have to get rid of the stigmas because that's what keeps us stuck.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And how you word things and say things can completely change, how people are perceiving it. So I definitely agree. And now, of course, you do speaking and workshops as well. I feel like, again, that kind of just unfolded with your coaching, your writing. How can I reach more people? Correct.
Right. Right. The workshops I was able to go into organizations and businesses. And I just did one at a library last week. The library sponsored it. So I was able to get paid for my time and effort, but everyone was able to come at no cost to them, which I love that. That's beautiful.
Nice.
That serves everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And then you also mentioned you had a podcast, but you said the
Mhm.
word had. Are you no longer actively doing the podcast?
That is correct. I brought it to a close, a finale at the end of 2024.
Okay, and is that, like, forever, it's done forever, or are you gonna get back into podcasting, you think, or just podcast guesting?
I never, the never say never line. I'm not going to say that I'm going
Okay.
to brought to a close because I felt God told me to do that, but
Oh,
it's
okay.
out
Okay.
there. And if he wants to resurrect it, I will let him. But right now it's still out there. I still have all the episodes on my YouTube channel, and the podcast
Right.
is still available on Apple. So it was called Victorious Souls.
Hmm. Yeah, I saw that, and, you kind of given us a 30,000 overview of, all your stuff. I wanna have a big takeaway here, and on your website, you have it's called Danielle's Proven Process. See, expose, love, free, which spells self, the self framework. Could you kind of go over that and why that is such a featured item on your, website?
I feature it because everyone needs a process. When we are just trying to do something, when I was trying to heal, I had no process. I didn't have anyone help me with the process. I met someone who had gone through trauma, but they were focusing on this, and but so I would piecemeal from all the places that I could to heal. So piecemealing like that and just kicking and screaming and grabbing is not efficient. By having a process, you know what you're doing and you feel like you have a place where you're at. Like if you're playing a game, you start at the start space and then you move around. You don't just like pick it up and randomly put it around the board. There's a process to the game. So there's a process to healing as well. And that process came out of me seeking God of how did you heal me? Because what was the process? How do I share this with people? And he's the one who showed me the process it was, and I call it self for two very specific reasons. I call it self because it focuses on the person because only they can change their life. I can't change their life, only they can do it. So, and our self resides, our choice resides in ourself. No one can make a choice for us. When we feel like someone's making a choice for us, it's called manipulation or coercion. No one can make a choice for us. God honors choice. It was right there from the beginning in the middle of the garden. God didn't hide the tree on a mountain. He didn't wait till a week later. It was front and center. Choice is so important. Only yourself can make the choice. And the second reason is self is a part of me that was attacked a great deal. I was called selfish growing up. A lot of the theology that I was subjected to was about killing the self and eradicating the self
Mm.
and dying to the self. And you just need to not you put yourself down and you put yourself on the back and put everyone else in front of you. And so I was, you're supposed to evaporate the self because it's not me. It's only God that lives. It's only Jesus and I don't matter. And it's just, no, we're going to focus on the self. Jesus came so we could be one with him. That's not to eradicate us. That's to connect with us. So the self, that's why it's called self. And the S is C, it's about awareness, because if we don't see something, we can't do anything about it. Like the childhood emotional neglect, if we don't know something is missing, we're not going to do anything about it. My counselor unpacked it or revealed it with the words, something went terribly wrong.
Yeah.
And then she began to tell me how things were supposed to have been, and my mouth just dropped open. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that was a thing. So that was the awareness part there. But then he is exposing, that's getting to the bottom of the issue. That's getting to the cause of the issue. That's getting to the why do we see this thing here? Or why does this thing we see matter? So we have to go deeper. Then I had to look into how do I heal this childhood emotional neglect? What do I do about it? So I would act on whatever my counselor was giving me to do. But L in the process, I think, is a crucial part of the process because sometimes we see stuff that we don't like and it makes us feel yucky. Or we see it and we're like, oh, cool. But then we found out why. And we're like, then that makes us feel yucky. And then we want to jump in bed and pull the covers over our head. It's just why we need love. We need love. Everyone needs love. It's our greatest need. We all need a different amount of love. And someone who goes through a trauma exposure, like that little girl falling down, love can mitigate that. That's one of the reasons why two people can go through two different things and one be okay and one not be. It could be this person was surrounded by support and love and encouragement. And so they were able to process things right away and
Yeah.
it didn't leave a mark. Whereas this one, they were abandoned. They had no
Mhm.
help, which is what happened to my family growing up. We had no support when my grandmother died, my dad died, and my brother died. We had no support system. We were just there, me, my mom, and my brother. That's how big our family was, the three of us. And no support there, no love. That's a problem. So love is a crucial part of the process to give you courage, to give you confidence, to give you strength, to give you hope, to give you everything you need to move forward into the fourth part of the process of free, which is where action steps, where you do things to bring about the change you're looking for, to bring about the transformation you're looking for, to bring about the difference. And this process is done over and over again because we don't get to where we are in one moment. So the process is a cycle that you go through over and over again. And then you go again. You see, well, I just did this thing. I took this action. So see, what did this do for me? It didn't work. Well, why didn't it work? And then encouraging yourself and through the process over and over again. It's a process that anyone, they can grab a hold of it, even reading it on my website, but we need people. So that's why I do coaching, because we heal in together. We heal in the
Yeah.
confines of relationship. But sometimes people, they're not ready for that. So that's why I offer so many free things on my website, is so people can start. You can start. If you're suffering, if you're wondering, if you're needing healing, start. Grab free stuff and start. And then move forward with who you feel you can trust, because you need to heal in a safe place. Find someone safe.
For sure. And, just speaking of those free resources, I know from having looked at your website, you've got more resources and it's a slew of books that you recommend. So I definitely would encourage people to check that out and take a look at those along with your website, which we're gonna have in a description below for everyone to check out. Your podcast, your speaking, your coaching, your courses, and then most importantly, of course, your books. And are you working on any books now, or you think you're gonna take a little break, or what are you feeling?
I have one I'm gathering for, sort of like when I was
I knew it. I knew it.
matter. I have files, and it's had 3 different titles so far, and it's kind of a mess right now, so we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. As an author, I understand the titles can come and go quite a bit before you end on the final one, and then you're always wondering, did I choose the right one? I like this one, and it's hard. It's hard. Same with the cover image. You get back a couple different samples, and you're like, I like all of them. Is there a way we could just print a book with like multiple covers? Like see, that's the fun thing with comic books. They'll just, like, print 10 of the same one with different cover images. But, yeah, so we're gonna have your website description below for people to check out and to connect with you further, as well as check out your social medias. And what would be the one thing you leave everyone with today? Obviously, you just went over the self framework, but if you had to compact our whole conversation into just a little neat takeaway for everyone to reflect on and to kinda digest and take a step back at their life and see how it's affecting their life and if they need to implement it or not, what would that be?
Well, was saying earlier, you matter and I love you. But my question to you would be, do you love you? Do you
Mhm.
love you? Do you love you without condition? And pause and think about that. And if you don't, do something about it, because you need to love yourself because you matter. God loves you. I love you.
Hashtag that lady on the internet who loves you. Ms. Danielle Bernock. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and for all that you do. And I hope that your books, your speaking, your courses reach people as well as this episode. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. This was delightful.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride. Jokes and laughter fill the air, on this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, the source of great pride.